The buildings themselves are inefficient and costly to operate and maintain. There's an old, inefficient heating system. On the right-hand side just shows some green, sustainable design concepts that can save the operation and maintenance costs. So let's talk about the building process itself. The old way, what you used to do before the moratorium in the old process was the town would hire an architect, and they'd do a study and design. Basically, the town would choose their desired project, and they'd request the state for reimbursement, and the percentage was unknown. There's a whole new process. Mitt Romney put forth a moratorium and revamped and basically established the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and it's a totally new process for how you go about building a school. And basically, the town has to submit what's called a statement of interest, and then the state has to select a town out of, there's currently 225 statements of interest for the state of Massachusetts from different communities. And the state is a partner with the town, hand in hand, every step along the process. Before you were kind of on your own, and then you hope for reimbursement. Now the state is heavily involved every step of the way. They tell you what you can do, they tell you what you can't do. And that's so that you don't overbuild or underbuild the school. The reimbursement rate is also pay as you go. So every time you need to write a check at every substantial completion, the state is writing their portion of it. Before, you'd have to do it all the way along and then hope for reimbursement at the end. So where are we now? The good news is that we were selected, North Reading was selected. They select currently between 15 and 20 projects a year out of 225 priority projects submitted by other communities to move into this next stage. Now the stage is called feasibility and schematic design. As you might know, it seems like a lot of money to request for a feasibility study. A feasibility study itself only costs about $25,000. This is a much more in-depth, elaborate process that needs to happen. And we'll go into that in a little bit. And the purpose of this stage is to work with the MSBA to formulate a plan to upgrade our secondary school facilities in a way that's educationally sound and cost efficient. And the state will pay approximately 50% of this next phase. So what's next? The town needs to authorize $1 million, approximately half of which will be reimbursed, to continue the state's process of feasibility and schematic design stage. Now, that $1 million wasn't just pulled out of the sky. That was determined between our architect, talking on behalf of North Reading, with the state, going back and forth on a couple of conversations, and the state came back with that $1 million number. This stage is required by the state as part of their process. You have to follow along exactly what they ask you to do. It's used to retain an owner's project manager as well as the architect and design team. And that $1 million is cost consistent with other Massachusetts communities, and there's three recent examples right there. So what does that $1 million get you? First of all, about 20% of it, or $200,000 in this case, is used to acquire the owner's project manager. It's required by the MSBA, and we retain the owner's project manager to act as a liaison between North Reading, the project architect and design team, and the MSBA. And they're typically industry professionals, construction people, and they provide the clerk of the works function and an additional set of eyes on our project. And the other 80%, or in this case $800,000, retains the architects, engineers, and all the consultants necessary to complete this in-depth next step. It's required by the MSBA, and this is a more elaborate feasibility study. The feasibility study portion includes existing conditions, the space and program requirements, site options and alternatives, and then a preliminary cost and materials option, so we'll know what type of materials in general that the school is going to be built. Will it be a wood school, will it be a brick school, or that renovation. The schematic design portion, and I'll talk a little bit about what the project is or isn't. Basically, what you used to do is the town would just pick our project and then go. What has to happen now is we have to go through this next step, and during this step, we'll actually define the project. Right now, we don't know. The project could be just a renovation to just the high school. It could be a renovation to the high school and a renovation to the middle school. It could be a brand new high school and nothing to the middle school, or it could be a brand new high school and a full renovation to the middle school with a shared core facility. We don't know until we complete this next step. We're not allowed to say other towns, years ago you used to be able to do that, you can't do that now. The state helps define what is and isn't done during this next phase. So here's our timeline. Basically tonight we're asking for a vote of $1 million, half of which will be reimbursed for our next phase. If that passes, then we can hire the owner's project manager and the design team by August. It'll take them about 6 to 9 months to complete this next phase. And at that point, we'll have our project defined. We'll know what it is, we'll know what it'll cost, we'll know the exact reimbursement rate that the state will give us back. And at that point, once the MSBA gives us the thumbs up, which will be about summer of 2011, at that point, the town has 120 days to vote up or down the big project. If we vote yes, then the project can be completed in the fall of 2013. If we vote no, we go to the bottom of the list, we become project number 226, and essentially we'll be going it alone without state reimbursement if you take into account there's 225 open projects without any new ones being added on, and the state accepts between 15 and 20 a year. Also, the fact that the state is not in the business of just paying for feasibility studies and kicking in $500,000 plus or minus. They want to build schools. So if we come back with a no vote, we're going to go it alone. At any time in the next 15, 20 years, we want to go forward. So why should we proceed? North Reading has a history of educational excellence that can and should be continued. There's also a cost in doing nothing. Wayne Hardacker, Director of Buildings and Grounds, along with Ed Stiles, who worked in that department for years, from our group, from the Secondary Schools Building Committee, put together a list every year, and this year it was updated in April, of priority number 1 and number 2 maintenance needs that are defined as just absolute have to get done. And that list exceeds $10 million. If you want to see a copy of that list, you can link to our website. These are not things that are going to increase any of the space sizes. These are not things that are going to upgrade technology. These are things that are going to repair a failing septic system. These are things that are going to put in high energy glass as opposed to single pane glass. These are things that are going to repair, not upgrade anything. It's just a Band-Aid approach, and we're at $10 million with no state reimbursement. If that's done, the educational requirements will still not be met. The operation and maintenance costs will continue to increase. Indoor air quality concerns are still there. We have asbestos in both the middle school and the high school, and at some point it's going to need to be abated or dealt with. We also have had high CO2 ratings at certain times. We've had to do things to the HVAC to get the airflow better. There will still be space deficiencies that will continue to exist. And then there's also something called Chapter 34. If we decide to do a project in the high school, for example, at some point, and that cost of that project, say we want to make the classrooms bigger and just bring them up to 900 square feet. If we decide to do that and we spend the project more than 30% of the assessed tax value of the high school, then we have to bring the entire high school up to ADA code. Right now we're grandfathered in because we haven't done a major project that exceeds that. The facilities problems will continue to worsen. The price of energy is not going down. It's also a great market for new construction. Not to say that we're going to have new construction, but it's a great market for renovation if that's what the state tells us we have to do. But if the state says you do have to build a new school, it's a great market to do that in. There's also an investment in property values. So why should we proceed? We've got a one-time, once-in-a-generation, one-time opportunity to receive state reimbursement. The state set our base rate at 45.11%. That's the absolute bare minimum that the state's going to match on any of the projects that we do. And it's also the bare minimum that the state's going to reimburse for this $1 million of the feasibility study. You can get additional points depending on what the project is. For example, if we build a green school, you get extra points over that 45.11. If you do a renovation portion, that portion gets a certain percentage. So when you factor all that in, between our architect and the state, the feedback was that we would be plus or minus 50%, and we're pretty comfortable with that number. It's not just a number we pulled up. So the time is now. The students of North Reading, both for today and tomorrow, are counting on your support. We'll just run through this real quick. These are the mandatory steps, and then we'll take questions. You submit the statement of interest to the MSBA. We've done that. The MSBA selection project to move into the next stage. North Reading was selected. You have to determine the cost of that next stage. We've done that at $1 million. Now we're at that circle where the town has to approve that next stage. If the town doesn't approve this next stage, this project is dead for reimbursement. We'd have to go it alone. And then the next stage, if it is approved, we hire the owner's project manager and the architectural firm. And at the conclusion of this next phase, we will know what the project will and will not include. We'll know what the cost is. We'll know what the rebate percentage is. And we can calculate what the cost is going to be. And at that point, the town will have 120 days to vote it up or down. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Discussion. This is what? Name and address for the record.
On a 1917 Sunset Avenue. So my question is, have you ever talked to the management of other schools that... Have you ever talked to the management of other schools who have done the same studies and how satisfied they are with the outcome and whether they've taken any next steps to follow up on the suggestions that they've
Of this next phase? Is that the question? Or just in building in general, have we done our homework?
Just in general, have you ever talked to other schools who have undergone similar studies and see what they think about it, whether it was worth the money and the time?
Well, we visited, I can answer that from the board's perspective.
Mr. Noble, would you do us all a favor? Would you repeat the question, because I'm not sure I heard what the question was.
Sure, I believe the question is, has anyone from the secondary schools building committee consulted with any other building committees from other towns on similar projects to find out if this next phase was worth it or not? Is that pretty accurate?
Correct.
Okay. And the answer would be, it's a good question, by the way, and the answer is that the secondary schools building committee, a lot of us have been doing this, like myself and Janine, for about 5 years. Some, like Chuck Carucci and Lori Woods, for as many as 10 years. And in that time, we started down the road of a project, and the moratorium came, and we weren't allowed to do what we were getting to go do, and you were kind of stopped. And at that point, we had to then go to the state, and the state has this defined section that you have to go through from point A to point Z. This is a necessary step. So we have talked to other building committees, we've talked to other schools, we visited other schools. We actually visited Triton Regional, among others. You know, each of us took a couple of schools back in 2006, and we visited them. But at that point, it was a different process. It was still the old process where the town kind of does whatever they want to do, and then the state comes back and either approves it for a certain percentage or not. Right now, we're in this first go-round of schools where we're in part of this program, and we got through, you know, the help of, as mentioned earlier, Senator Carr and Representative Jones. We were fortunate enough to be in this first group of 15 or 20 people, 15 or 20 towns, to be able to go through this next step. So this next step is essential. If you don't do this next step, the state's not going to give you a penny for reimbursement. So we have to go through this next step, and it will define what our project does and does not include. So to that end, we really don't have a choice whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. We have to go through it. We can't pick the project. We love to pick. Everybody, I'm sure in this room, has an idea of what they'd like to see and not see in a project, but we can't do that. We have to lean on the state for the process, and we have to follow the process if we want reimbursement money.
So what you're saying that the farm is new and there are no schools out there that have gone through the process so far?
How many schools have gone through the new process so far? I don't know the number of schools that have gone through, maybe 10. You know, 10 to 20 schools. This is the first year, the first calendar year of this go-round, and the feasibility study section portion of this takes between 6 and 9 months to complete. So, you know, we're not even, 12 months into it, so some of them just started their phase, and then from that point they have 120 days to go through. Wilmington has a project right now. Some of the ones that we listed on the board, but basically their needs are different for their town than what our needs are, and basically we have to go through this process to identify what those are and not.
Okay, thank you. My second question is $400,000 for project managers and our wages. What did you think on that?